Welcome all participants. We will move on to the next session. It is my privilege to introduce the profile of our esteemed resource person for this session, Dr. Rajesh Balasubramanian, a consultant for Galaxkey Overseas Company and founder and lead auditor at SGC Service with 15 years of expertise in training, auditing, and consulting. See, he is recognized for leading impactful management, solution, and quality surveys in the field. His distinguished leadership in SDC service and international consulting experience position him as a driving force in advancing best practices and business excellence. I would like to request Rajesh sir to kindly start the session. Topic: National and International Safety Standards and Regulation. Welcome you, sir, for this session.
Okay. A very good evening. Thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you so much to the St. Mary's Polytechnic College for giving this valuable opportunity to be a part of this interactive program related to the concept national and international safety standards and regulations as a part of your FDP initiative in the organization and the institution. I hope my voice is clear and my screen is visible to one and all.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you for confirming. Okay, yeah. So since I'm in the presentation mode, I will be having limitations in terms of seeing if somebody has raised the hand or somebody is unmuting and asking the question. Feel free to have a discussion how you would like to pace it during the session. If you would like to keep it at the end of the session, I would welcome all, but don't multiple questions at the same time can lead into confusion. So if that's the case, you can drop your question in the chat box and post the session. I will try to answer all the questions that have been raised. So thank you so much, and I quickly welcome all to this interactive program. So I hope my introduction is already done by one of your colleagues. Thank you so much. Yes, I'm a founder as well as a lead auditor for various management system standards. I have competency to handle more than 35 plus international standards as an auditor and do an assessment to various organizations to evaluate the compliance to the requirements of such standards which are there globally. So having a global exposure on the management system standards, over 15 years of experience, have managed projects across different countries, across different sizes of organizations, right from 2 people to 20,000 people at different countries like India, our own country, UK, Australia, UAE, GCC countries, Gulf, that is USA and Singapore and Malaysia. So this has been the work exposure of mine, which probably the ma'am also introduced a while ago. So I welcome you all to this session of what is this overview, right? So this comprehensive program equips, a lot of manufacturing professionals, managers, compliance officers with some essential knowledge on what is this OHS standard. So I believe, one of the faculty prior to me as a speaker has given a good brief about what is HERA as a concept, hazard identification risk assessment, right? So this is one of the element of OHS series, which is occupational health and safety series. Most of the OHS series has its roots. Like you have a big we always say, no, we might travel across the world, but our route is always there to our place of birth, right? So across the world there could be different standards, different regulations, different benchmarks that are set related to the practice associated with occupational health and safety. OHS is an abbreviation that stands for occupational, was O, health for H, and safety for S. And the abbreviation is occupational health and safety. So it's about safeguarding a worker. The worker could be referred as anybody who is working at the workplace. That is the definition of a worker. For example, it can be doorman to chairman, peon to president. Everybody does work at the workplace, right? A peon might be involved in movement of certain paperwork from one place to another, scheduling some communications, memos, etc. And maybe president could be involved in drafting some policies, approving budgets, and so on, right? But everybody are at the workplace, and when they are at the workplace, it is very important to safeguard both the health as well as the safety of such individuals at the workplace. That is why it is called occupational. So when we talk about the OHS series, it doesn't talk about certain hazards that you are exposed at your house. It doesn't talk about the hazards that you are exposed at public places. It talks about the hazards that you are exposed at work. And that is why the term occupational is prefixed in this particular terminology: occupational health as well as safety. And the abbreviation to it is OHS. And the entire OHS sequence as a regulation benchmarks itself to conventions which are passed by and published by ILO. I think most of the audience over here might be very familiar with an abbreviation called ILO, since the number of participants are huge. If somebody would like to even volunteer without confusion, and can you tell me what is ILO? Have you heard about this term ILO? Okay, so ILO is an abbreviation which is the epitome of all the conventions that are associated with lot of labor and worker related regulations, focusing on their health and safety as well as welfare related to the individuals at work. ILO is an acronym. Just like how OHS is an acronym, ILO is also an acronym for International Labor Organization. So this International Labor Organizations is a legal binding of international treaty of various labor standards that are created through the tripartite negotiations of its members and are passed as conventions during the international labor conferences. Okay, they do talk about a lot of topics. It's not just health and safety. They talk about freedom of association. You have the CVA, what we call it as collection of bargaining, right? Collective bargaining association, freedom of association, elimination of child labor, young worker management, prison labor, migrant labor, non-discrimination, equal opportunity at work. So there are multiple areas that they keep on passing the conventions through the member states, in which India is also one of the member states. And during the ILC, just like how we have in our parliament, we have sessions: summer session, winter session, mid session, where certain bills are passed, right, by the members of parliament. Similarly, member of states who are different countries do participate in this international labor conferences, and they pass certain conventions which forms the epitome or the center point for all the OHS regulations across the world. So that is why, especially those who are interested in working in many places across the world, if you familiarize yourself with the ILO conventions, it is very easy wherever you go across the world, whether it is in Dubai, whether it is in Sharjah, whether it's in any other Gulf country, let's say like Oman, or let's say like Kuwait, or let's say Qatar, or let's say you are going into some places in US, or let's say in UK, or in Mexico, Australia, wherever you go, you will see the root of these regulations are always traced back to ILO. So as a professional, if you familiarize yourself with a lot of ILO conventions and link it to the ISO frameworks, it gives you a global exposure. Wherever you travel, it is very easy to identify and interpret the requirements. So on a scale of 1 to 100, 80% these requirements are common across the world. You will not see it. The delta of 20% may vary. What will may vary? The type of how these requirements are enforced, the extent to which how these requirements are enforced, the depth of how these requirements are enforced. some parameters of how these requirements are enforced, the fines that are enforced, the different forms that have to be submitted to the legal authorities that will differ, or the frequency at which these forms are submitted may differ. So there is the delta 20%, which may vary from country to country, but 80% of the time, most of these requirements trace back to the roots of the conventions which are passed in ILO, which stands for International Labor Organization. Okay, and this particular program we are trying to cover, the different regulations that are there at parts of US, UK, Europe, Australia, UAE, GCC, and also our own country, India. So this program gives you that importance. See, for example, always there is two things, right? One is, you have either a fear or you have a favorite. What is the fear? Oh, what if something goes wrong is a fear. Oh, I like this, let me do it, is your favorite. Either things happen in the world only because of two things. Either things happen because of fear or things happen because of favorite, right? Let's say, for example, you want to even eat a plate of meal. A kid wants to eat a plate of meal. You prepare something they like. If it is their favorite, they will eat. If it is not their favorite, but still they are eating, means either because they are feared that one of the parent will scold them, right? So there are only two things that drives any progress. One is either fear or there is a favorite. The regulations bring the fear part. Okay, so these regulations bring a fear part into the employers that, hey, we have to take care of our labors. If we don't take care of our labors, if we don't take care of our employee, if we don't take care of our workers, as a principal employer, there is a regulator who in turn can impose penalties, impose sanctions, impose imprisonment, impose punishments into an employer. So typically, if you see, these regulations are helping the OHS requirements driven through what is so called as a fear. And that fear gives a platform of a safety to a employee who is going on a trust to the workplace that my employer is going to take care of the health and safety needs. Back at home, the family is in the confidence that my own family member who has traveled at workplace is returning back safely. And there have been major disasters which have happened in the past, and history has given a lot of information of such disasters, which in turn has compromised the safety and lives of many individuals at workplace. There could be safety disasters which are acute, which are emergency, which are chronic. There could be multiple ways. Something could be an immediate safety disaster, like a fatality, or like a limb loss, temporary disability, permanent disability. There could be short-term effects. There could be long-term effects. And these all can happen if people don't focus on what is called as health and safety needs. If you're just focusing on profit, production, sales, making your top line and bottom line of a balance sheet keep on growing, then, and not focus on these needs, in turn can compromise a lot of health and safety issues. Even if I were to give some examples that many might have read on newspapers, you might have known many years back, many decades back, probably, there was a lot of health and safety concerns in a place called Shivakasi, where they primarily do a lot of crackers, right? So a lot of hazardous chemicals, materials were handled by children, young workers, aged, leading into lot of health effects to them, safety issues to them, and nobody to question, right? And that is where the question comes into place in the form of a regulator. And today we are here to discuss about such regulations which instills a concept of fear across the employers, making them more responsible and committed to protect the health and safety of the people who are working in their organization or institution. So overall, we will be covering these agendas, a brief introduction, which we have already had. What are the different international safety standards that are there? What is the OSHA standards that are prominently in US? Similarly, you have HSE regulations in UK. You have the different directives in the European Union known as the EU directives. Then you have the work health and safety laws in Australia. You have the MOHRE guidelines, a part in UAE. Then you have the Gulf guidelines. Then you have the OHS code, which is popular in India, also known very much known as the factory rules and regulations. And we'll also conduct, have a brief, visual look through on what is the comparison and the best practices across these, and then we'll try to just have a small Q&A session open to the forum and takeaways, and we will conclude the session. So overall, this would be the agenda that we will be covering in this particular interaction. So the program objective is basically to ensure that the participants who are attending this session grasp what are the international safety frameworks, emphasizing and its relativity with ILO conventions. As I told you, ILO conventions is very important. Those who would like to understand this framework. Why? Even if you are going to get employed anywhere, you know what is the loss for your safety. And B, if you are going to be a health and safety professional working in any organization, this will be your key point, because if you have to even convince your employer, why should we do this? What is the consequence? Your conventions are very, very important. Okay, because every regulation talks about one open statement telling employers shall also be committed to comply with ILO conventions. It's an open statement. It's like it's open sea. I have to swim through. I can get many things around it, right? So being a health and safety professional, especially if you're being recruited somewhere and you're being handed over some responsibilities of health and safety requirements, ILO conventions forms the basis foundation of the practices you define in your organization, and the icing on the cake is definitely the local regulations that needs to be considered. Okay. And we'll also see the integration of the international standards. ISO is an organization which is located in Switzerland, Geneva. It's formed by its members from different parts across the world. For example, you have EIAC, MDX International Accreditation Committee, being a representative from MDX. We have GCC, GCCA Accreditation Committee from the Gulf countries. Similarly, from India, you have NABCB, National Accreditation Board for Certification Bodies, under the council leadership of QCI, Quality Council of India, who is a part of our membership in ISO. Similarly, you have from USA, you have ANSI, American National Standard Institute. From the UK region, you have BSI, British Standards Institute. From Australia, you have JAS. From New Zealand, you have ANZ. From German, you have TIN. So you have multiple members who form ISO, and that is why it is not National Standard Organization, National Organization for Standardization, but it is International Organization, because it's also organization. What is organization? Formed by its multiple people who have their own responsibility and authorities, right? So even this is formed by multiple members. That is why it's an organization, and their main motto is to publish standards, so that when these individual countries and individual companies located in different countries adopt these, they are at par with the global requirements. That is why it is called as International Organization for Standardization, but it is abbreviated as ISO because it is inspired by a Greek word called isos, ISOS, and that is why it is abbreviated as ISO. The Greek word called isos means equal. The intent of this organization is to publish standards globally so that they all are at equal across the world. See, whether you are in India, whether you are in US, whether you are in UK, if you are compliant with ISO standard, the practices remain the same irrespective of whichever part of the country you are in, world you are in. That's why it's called, inspired by the Greek word called isos, equal. They have abbreviated themselves as ISO. ISO is International Organization for Standardization. So we will also discuss about how these global safety frameworks are integrated with ISO standards. We'll also discuss about the region specific regulations and compliance obligations, which form a key note for a particular individual who's going into a particular jurisdiction for a way of working, right? And then harmonizing strategies of this manufacturing operations and local laws. Manufacturing and construction, my friends, are the two highest industry segment which pose lot of physical hazards. Lab and hospital are the segments which pose lot of hazards associated with biological hazards. And definitely across the industry where chemicals are used, chemical hazards are there. For example, an educational institution, let's say there is a chemistry lab, you have chemical hazards. Let's say there is a company who is manufacturing Ayurvedic medicines. You have lot of chemicals which are used as pulverizing agents, etc., to make refined raw material ingredients for Ayurvedic products. You have chemical hazards, right? So wherever chemical is there, chemical hazards are definitely existing. But in manufacturing and construction industry, physical hazards are the highest. In hospital and in labs, biological hazards are the highest because you deal with viruses, you deal with pathogens, you deal with microbiological substances, right? So a lot of microbiology is involved, microbiological elements are involved. So biological hazards density and intensity is quite high in hospitals and labs, and definitely chemical hazard could be there in across all the industry segments. For example, our own home also carries chemical hazards. Why? We have toilet chemicals which we'll be using for cleaning our own domestic toilets and effluents, right? So definitely chemical hazards is widespread across different industry. And whereas these regulations definitely has a lot of intensity and focusing more on physical hazards, rather yes, there is definitely a touch base about chemical hazards as well as biological hazard, but lot of focuses are there on physical hazards, especially on the regulation sides, because physical hazards are generally the highest form of hazards which can cause a risk to the health as well as safety of a particular individual. Okay, and then heighten the awareness of manufacturing hazards. We'll try to discuss through some bits and pieces of what is our experience that we would have seen across the industry from physical hazards, chemical hazards, and biological hazards, and the different techniques that have been adopted as a mitigation plan. So that's what it is. So to give you a brief introduction about what is OH&S, from especially from a manufacturing sector, is definitely about largely guarding your machines, so ensuring the physical workplace is up to the mark, chemical exposures are properly addressed, and ergonomics at the workplace to ensure both health as well as safety needs are important. For example, let's say you have I'll take a very simple example, a garment industry. Okay, if you say a garment industry, or let's take a tailor, right? There is a tailor is there, let's say at the end of your street. There is a tailoring machine through which he is stitching some garments, and if you scale that trailer with 1,000 machines, it becomes a garment factory. right? So this trailer, let's say, is using the scissors and cutting some apparels around, right? The scissors can get contact with the hand, and they could have a skin cut. The tailor is using a tailoring machine and sewing the garments, and the knee can get in contact with the high speed movement to the hand and cause a finger injury, right? So machine guarding plays a very important role to ensure certain physical hazards are avoided. A very simple example: we are driving on the road and we wear a helmet. Helmet is as good. Why is a helmet wear? A helmet is a guard to protect your head, right? So that is also physical guarding, machine guarding, right? So it's guarding a machine called your brain, which thinks, works, acts. So physical hazards are largely controlled through a lot of guards implementation, mainly, and we call it as a lot of engineering controls that are implemented to ensure safety at the workplace. Chemical exposure, for example, toxic chemicals. You might have seen yourself when you walk into a newly painted house, you see a pungent hitting you. Some might do a small glitch of the throat. Somebody might do like this. Why? Because that pungent chemicals which are there in the air, not visible to you, is hitting your throat, causing you a probably irritation, irritants, we call say it, right? Some might have a itchiness on the skin. So there's a lot of chemical exposures which are there, which needs to be controlled. And then there is ergonomics, poor ventilation, poor lighting, no proper seating, no proper facilities at the workplace. And it's quite a pity to see such stuff, which can definitely cause a lot of risk to that individuals, right? There have been huge cry about certain factories in Bangladesh and, and certain workplaces which were there, even in certain Gulf parts, etc. Many decades ago, before the regulations became strong, that people were exploited. They were taken from India, they were taken from Sri Lanka, they were taken from some smaller countries, and not given proper safe facilities, and they were exploited. See, now if you see, there is a definitely a huge shift. I will not say 100% ruled out. Yeah, but there is definitely a huge shift. And why there is this huge shift, exponential change? That is because of the regulations, my friends. It's only because of these regulations that have strengthened the countries to control such stuff happening in the organizations across the world. Compliance matters a lot because remember, we all had a huge pain, right? Like when the motor vehicle rules and all got revised, what was 100 rupees fine became 1,000 rupees, and it was very intensified, right? Oh my God, I was just paying 100 rupees, now I have to pay 1,000 rupees. Rather than that, okay, let me see what I should comply with, right? Penalties in health and safety are very, very, very huge. Companies may end up even closing the company if they cannot meet the penalty. I'll to just give you a small indication what could be penalty is like, you know, for a serious violation in US could be around $16,550. What is that approximately? Anyone? Nothing less than literally around 14 odd lakhs. One mistake, one serious mistake, the company has to pay 14 lakhs of rupees. And if it is multiple serious mistakes, just imagine 10 serious mistakes, 1 crore 40 lakh rupees gone for nothing. And if the industry doesn't bear it, there has to be punishments, there will be appeasements on the employers, so there'll be huge sanctions on the employers, maybe imprisonment also. So it is very, very important that these safety violations have huge penalties in place. For example, certain willful and repeated penalties can go up to another zero just added $1,60,000. What is $1,60,000 for you? That is nothing less than nearly around 14 to 50, 1.4 to 1.6 crores of fine. per violation, friends. It's not multiple violations, it's per violation. So it's a huge amount of penalties over there. Okay, so that is why, and especially recently, the administrations that have taken place, they have increased the penalties left, right, and center, even in US and across the globe. Okay, and there is a global stats that have been reported in the ILO website. Constantly you can see major industry disasters, everything are as a watchdog, they clearly look across the world and publish a lot of incidents, and there is huge amount of learning one can have because of case studies that are published in ILO website. For example, ILO says in the manufacturing industry alone across the world, there is a huge population of nearly 2.78 million. It's not 2.78 lakhs, it is 2.78 million occupational related fatalities that have occurred, right? So it's a huge number, and that is why regulations keep on making it stringent and stringent and stringent to instill a fear through which safety of a life can be assured by an employer who is working in the organization. So that is one part. Yeah, I heard a small voiceover. You had any query or question, someone? Okay, thank you so much. So as I told you, ISO stands for International Organization for Standardization. It's a globally recognized framework for harmonizing safety across the different borders, different countries, different geographicals across the world. ISO is a global body harmonizing the standard requirements. And one such standard that they published in the year 2018 was a standard called ISO 45001. So, like we have multiple mobiles, right? Each mobile has a series. We say iPhone, very latest, news making the market, iPhone 17 series, Galaxy S26 series, right? So each mobile has a series. Similarly, ISO also has a lot of series of standards, and 45001 is a series on OH and S, which is occupational health and safety. And it is called as a management system, and the abbreviation is OHSMS, occupational health and safety management systems, right? So it focuses on risk assessment, something which probably widely covered by one of the speaker earlier to the session. It focuses on worker participation, continual improvement, how you are enhancing, how you are moving towards the progress on both health and safety parameters. For example, let's say absenteeism rate. Last year my absenteeism rate was 30 days per employee. This year, I have reduced the absenteeism rate from 30 days to 26 days. Why? I have improved the health and safety conditions. I have improved the workplace. I have improved employee well-being at the workplace, because of which that could be one of the contributing factor towards absenteeism decrease, right? Attrition reduction. So continually how you are improving to ensure health and safety parameters are progressing at the workplace. Right? It's very important, especially in manufacturing hazards like respirable crystalline silica or glass factory. Or let's say there is a factory which is making certain articles. Crystalline silica could be fine dust that is there, which you are inhaling, getting into your respiratory system, in turn contaminating your blood, which can lead into chronic effects or acute effects, long term or short term, or missionary risks which can immediately impact incident, right? So this standard was also earlier very popularly, if somebody might have got an exposure, was known as OHSAS 18001, which is called as Occupational Health and Safety Assessment Series. It was called as, okay, and it was not a ISO standard, it was a BS as in British standard. It was called as BS OSHA's 18001. So it was a British standard which they revised and made it as an ISO standard, so that it is globally adopted rather than regionally adopted. It becomes regional or nation specific when it is BS, British standard, right? But when it becomes the ISO standards, it's palatable across the world. Everybody can adopt it universally and ensure that the compliance can be harmonized across the globe, right? And it is framed on a structure called Annex SL. How we humans have a structure. What is the name of the human structure called as? It's called as a skeleton, right? Everybody have the same positioning of where a skull is, where a thigh bone is, where is a feet bone, where is a toe, okay, where is the chest bone, where is the shoulder, where is the femur. Everything is same across all the humans, right? So ISO 45000 has the same Annex SL structure across all the ISO series of standards. The structure of the standard is called Annex SL, and it focuses on a concept called prevention. Okay, because this again comes back to the roots from ILO, which was the International Labour Organization conventions, that you have to focus on prevention. And there is an English saying, a quote that many of you might be familiar with: prevention is better than cure, right? So that is why we prevent. We wash our hands. Why? To keep our hands safe, so that we don't have cause a contamination, in turn lead to an infection. Prevention is better than cure, and I think the world learned it during the era which we shouldn't a time we shouldn't remember, called the pandemic, where a lot of measures were taken towards prevention techniques, right? So the standard as 45,000 focuses on the concept of what is called as prevention of injury at the workplace. How do you structure and organize your workplace so that you prevent injuries at the workplace? How do you organize the workplace to ensure you prevent ill health? The standard focuses on prevention of injury. The standard focuses on prevention of ill health. The standard focuses on providing a health and safety workplace. The standard focuses on protection to the workers, so that any form of health and safety risk or the hazards that are contributing to such risks are prevented in the organization, right? We see a child, running across the house, and what we will say immediately, human tendency, say, hey, slow down, you will get hurt. What is this? This is as good as prevention technique. You're preventing a child from getting hurt because of a negligence way of running, or a behavior. The child is having the behavior of carelessly walking, carelessly running, and they might get hurt. So this behavior-based hazard is being controlled by a prevention through a conversation, saying that, hey, be careful. It's administrative control. You're telling by your mouth, hey, be careful. You're trying to administer the individual, right? So the standard focuses on preventing these injuries, preventing these ill healths. I know that there could be a lot of fumes that are coming out of this burning activity. So how can I prevent it? I prevent it by giving a mask, so that the individual wears some mask where these burning activities leading into some fumes, and the fumes might have some particulate matter which are filtered through the mask, and the air that is breathed inside is much safer. I am preventing respiratory contamination, respiratory infection. Let's say the same activity called burning is there. I put an exhaust system. This exhaust system sucks out all the poisonous gases, fumes, black smog, okay, so that it doesn't spread across the workplace, and I prevent respiratory hazards at the workplace. So ISO 45000 focuses on prevention through the technique of risk assessment, and that risk assessment technique is called HIRA, HIRA, hazard identification and risk assessment, I think, which was largely covered in the previous session by the speaker, right? Then this IS 45000 has a lot of Elements of management system, like to have the health and safety policy defined, communicated and trained as a commitment from the employer and then contribution from the employees. Then you have objectives and targets that are defined, some goals towards health and safety, that we would like to have zero safety incident at the workplace, and everybody is working cautiously and consciously towards these goals, and having different processes set up so that these health and safety requirements are not compromised. Could be like a work permit system process, a safety process of starting the machine, safety process of switching off the machine, safety processes that is followed during the machine is under operation, safety process to be followed to enter the factory, to exit the factory, safety processes that are followed, let's say, before maintenance activities carried out, before a roof cleaning activities carried out, before electrical work is carried out. Some processes like LOTO, lockout and tag out, LOTO TOTO, okay, lockout, tag out, test out. Okay, so there are multiple things that are there as different processes that can be followed, which are the elements of how these management system of ISO 45000 talks about. And this standard focuses a lot on worker participation and consultation, because a manager sitting in a room cannot decide on the hazards that the worker is getting exposed to, right? But the worker is experiencing. A manager is assuming this is the hazard. A worker is experiencing this is the hazard. He thinks if he touches the hot surface, his hand will burn. The worker will say, hey, you think only touching a hot surface, my hand will burn. But you're forgetting that if I'm just standing in front of this hot surface, I am getting dehydrated. I might have certain dehydration related hazards, right? So worker is experiencing it, management might assuming it. So this ISO 45000 standard focuses on involving the workers actively as a participation and consultation into this activity. And I previously talked about having the HERA system in place, hazard identification and risk assessment exercise carried out across the different activities, products, processes, machinery, tools, infrastructure, and resources that are used, methods that are employed, materials that are used in the organization, to identify what are the risks and have a mitigation plans in form of prevention techniques, okay, to ensure hazards are prevented. See, I always, emphasize these standards do not guarantee error-free operations, because there is a lot of internal and external factors that drive for it, right? But these standards give you the three important R's. It helps you first and foremostly to become resilient, to strengthen your practices, to prevent the hazards to occur at the first place. But beyond that, there could be multiple factors that can originate into a 360-degree circle inputs on what, when, where, what something would happen. Then these standards will give you enough processes in place to strengthen, to respond. You can respond to the situation. Hey, if there is a chemical leak, I know what to do. Step 1, step 2, step 2, step 3, step 4, step N. Tada! I have addressed the chemical leak, right? So this helps you to respond, and finally it helps you to recover and rehabilitate back into your original situation at the earliest. So the standards, by properly exercising hazard identification risk assessment system, which is also known in multiple ways called as WBS, work and behavior safety analysis, WBSA, JSA, job safety analysis. There are multiple ways through which this is designed, like HAZOP is another technique. Okay, there are multiple ways through which it is defined, but everything has its root in terms of identifying the hazards and carrying out the risk assessments, right? And this will help in turn the organization to emphasize on the mitigation plans on the 3R concepts in terms of being resilient, in terms to respond, and in terms to recover and rehabilitate into normalcy at the earliest, right? And these are followed through some controls that are recommended to be defined by the organization based on the nature of hazards. You can have controls like elimination, you can have controls like substitution, you can have controls like engineering control, administrative control, and PP. If I take a small, very small, minuscule activity of, let's say, of a lab, computer assembly station, or manufacturing organization is manufacturing all these computers, laptops, mobiles, tech gadgets. And one of the activity that is very much common, not sure how many of you are familiar with that activity. It's called soldering. Soldering is a piece of a hot element which is used on a wire, and it is brought in contact with each other so that the wire melts and gives a jointing operation, right? Or let's take a much more simpler activity called welding. Many might have seen welding as a part of your way of life, walk of life, either when you're doing some civil works at your workplace or at your residence, right? If I take in welding as an activity, that welding gives a lot of fumes, heat sparks, hot environment, burns kind of hazards are very much evident in it. And how do I eliminate it? So instead of doing welding, I do a prefabrication of that item so that there is no need of welding activity at all. So I prefabricate it instead of welding. That becomes elimination, right? So I eliminate the entire welding activity. What is substitution? Okay, I cannot prefabricate. Let's say I want to construct a big iron bridge of 30 feet wide. I can't prefabricate it in the factory and bring it into the installation site. Why? Transportation cost goes so way, right? So what I'll do? I might say that, okay, I'll make it into bits and parts. Then I go to the site and I weld it over. But during this welding, there's hazards. So what I do? So I might say, okay, I will use some materials which are friendly towards the health and safety, friendly towards the environment, like lead-free welding material. ROHS, restriction of hazardous substances, a directive of European Union, okay, ROHS free welding material, through which instead of a hazardous material, I am substituting with a much more lesser hazardous material. That is called substitution. Then I have engineering control. I might give some exhaust systems. I will give some automatic glasses which glide through the process when the welding is started. I might put some safety controls as soon as the machine is started. Some safety controls are activated so that during the safety doesn't cause damage to the individuals for welding. Engineering control, right? Very simple example. In everybody's home, we have a main electrical box. In that electrical box, one electrical component is very, very common in everybody's house. What is it? MCB, ELCB, RCCB. You might have heard these terms. That is a classical example of engineering control. So that if there is some electrical wiring issues, these MCBs, ELCBs, or RCCBs perform the necessary engineering attributes and switch off the power to ensure that the risk resulting from such incidents do not step up higher. Example of an engineering control, right? Then you have administrative control, some policies you're establishing, procedures you're establishing, some guidelines you're giving, you're training them, you're telling them some do's and don'ts, you're giving them some work permit system before a work is started. So you are establishing some policies and procedures of how activities are carried out. That is administrative control. And finally, because I'm not able to do any of these, then I resort to the last called PPE, an abbreviation for personal protective equipment, like your safety helmets, safety gloves, safety shoes, safety masks, safety glasses, right? Safety earplugs. We wear all these to ensure that the safety hazard do not lead into an incident, right? For a cricketer, you'll see wears a pad. They wear a helmet. They wear a thigh guard. You know, they wear a chest guard. Why is this? Okay, so that the ball, which is high speeding, do not directly impact in the body. If it is going to happen, it will protect their internal organs and it will protect their physical structures, right? So PPE is personal protective equipment. So this is and one of the international recommendation guidelines that in any activity you're doing, once you do your hazard assessment, you establish your controls on the hierarchy of controls, where the most preferred controls is elimination and the least preferred control is PP. And then it emphasizes on building the operational controls across the internal processes as well as your supply chain, your vendors, your suppliers, your subcontractors. You also emphasize safety on that, because if they have a safety incident, your factory operations might get impacted, right? So then prepare yourself on emergency situations like fire, medical emergency, chemical spillage. There could be bites like a snake bite in remote locations, a tiger attack. Let's say a factory is located in some remote part of, let's say in Kerala, which is right next to the Western Ghats, and that there could be easily these animals entering into the facility, right? Because we have gone into their zone, they are not coming to our zone, right? But it's an emergency because there is hundreds of lives at that facility. So how you are prepared to handle such emergencies, have practices and mock drills done to ensure these emergency preparednesses are managed, and legal compliance had met. See, the beauty of ISO 45000, it drives back to the point of what our topic is: legal compliance. So this is an international safety standard, but this international safety standard also tells legal compliance, right? So it is very important that whether it is a regional, national, international requirement, legal compliance is a foundation basis across safety. So one such legal compliance that we are going to talk about now is called OSHA standard. It's published by US, United States of America. OSHA is a term which I think everybody might have already been familiar. OSH is occupational sector healthy, whereas A is for administration. That is a OSHA standard, which is under an act called as OSHA 1970. This is a regulation in US. In US, most of the regulations are driven through something called as 29 CF. See, they're basically like how in ILO we have conventions. In India, we have clauses and chapters. Okay. Similarly, you have in US something called as CFR. So the CFR is the different chapters and regulations that cover for various requirements associated with, associated with health and safety. So similarly, under the OSHA standard, the CFR is called as Code of Federal Regulations. I repeat, CFR is an acronym called as Code of Federal Regulations. So federal is the authority, government authority of US, who proposed this regulation. Regulation in other terms is rules. So government rules, what we call it as, is known as federal regulations, and their codes is what is called as CFR, Code of Federal Regulations. So 29 CFR talks about machine guarding, 29 CFR 1910 talks about communication. So there is a division D, which is specifically focusing in the OSHA Act, which is more on manufacturing sector. Similarly, you have multiple divisions on construction sectors and stuff like that, so that it focuses on different regulations towards health and safety, and provides tailored guidelines of equipment safety, workspaces, and different signages. Now, signage plays a very important role in OSHA. That is why if you see across the world, especially if you were anybody who have got travel across, the moment you see in the land in the airport, you see so many symbols: yellow, red, green, blue, colorful symbols. Why? They have a strong belief: out of sight is out of mind. Why do we have a God's image? I mean, it's just like, God is there everywhere, but why do you have the image? Why do you have a statue? Why do you have an idol? Uh, Basically, because it's a tendency that if it is not in sight, it is out of our mind, right? So similarly, safety emphasizes a lot of signages, and OSHA places very, very, very stringent norms on signages. So signages and symbols have to be there: caution, careful, carelessness. Like you might have seen some symbols where there is a finger getting stuck between two wheels. We call it as pinch hazard. So you see a lot of signages and symbols, which is one of the strength of OSHA regulations, that proper signages and symbols have to be given wherever hazard is there. That's why even you will see a wet floor, they'll put a stand over there saying, caution, wet floor, slippery, you will fall. And you will see a symbol, right? So OSHA has emphasized a lot on signages. And first thing, if an incident occurs, the government and the law questions, did the employer at least give a signage in the place in the first hand, to see if the diligence is carried out by the employer. Okay, so it emphasizes on a lot of mandatory training and fines, which we already spoke about, right? Similarly, in UK, there is a lot of HSE regulations, post-Brexit laws. UK became Europe and UK separate, right? The European Union became post the Britishers' exit, Brexit, so-called. So they published some of the regulations, which is called as Health and Safety Work Act, like how you saw um, OSHA Act of 1970. You have the Health and Safety Work Act that they carried out from the European Union, Europe regulations, and they made it as the UK regulations, which talks about duties of safe system, training, and equipment safety. Right, it addresses a lot of common hazards like slips, machinery entanglements, and then risk assessments and use of competent persons to do the work. Because if you give a person who doesn't know to drive a two-wheeler, he will end up banging somebody on the road. He will end up colliding himself into some other structure, and he or she might fall onto the road because of not knowing how to ride the two-wheeler. So there should be a competency for a person to ride a two-wheeler. What is it? The competency is as good as a driving license, right? So health and safety regulations in UK focuses on lot on competency. You just cannot do electrical work in a factory without being a certified electrician. You cannot do a plumbing work in the factory without being a certified plumber. You cannot do a masonry work in the factory without being a certified masonry. You cannot operate a forklift or drive a forklift without being a certified forklift operator. You cannot operate the machine without getting a training and undergoing a certification scheme on operating that machinery and equipment. So UK regulations focuses a lot on using competent persons to acquire these certifications. And these competencies sometimes could be internally driven through the factory, where the factory has the internal training and competency system, or there is public agencies who do give these trainings at free of cost in UK, and some are chargeable, to which persons can acquire this competency, and regularly they have to undergo. It's not for lifetime, right? Our driving license has for a period of 20 years, like that. They also have a period for 3 to 5 years. That is the stringency. Every 3 to 5 years they have to go re-attend the exam, re-undergo medical tests, eye test, vision test, etc., and then re-qualify themselves to be competent to handle it. So such a kind of stringent regulations are there under HSE regulations in UK. Similarly, in European Union, there is a lot of directives. So you could see in OSHA, they called it as CFR, Code of Federal Regulations. In UK, they called it as regulations. In Europe, they call it as directives. Okay, so there's a lot of directives from the European Union committees, which are basically the year of publication, followed by the code, followed by the directive. So if you see something called 2023, the regulation was published in 2023, belonging to a family of what is called as 1230, which is published by the European Union. So there are multiple committees who do publish directives. Could be electrotechnical commissions, engineering electrotechnical commissions, European unions, and so on, who have some directives. And one of the important directive published by them, and the focus is definitely the 1970 or 70 Act of UK gets carried forward, because it was basically European regulations. Along with that is the risk prevention techniques and worker consultation. In Australia, it is called as Australia WHS laws, which is called as the Model Work Health and Safety laws, which is also networked through an agency called Safe Work. Australia. Okay, and that Safe Work Australia is the agency who regulates all the laws of health and safety at workplaces, which is adopted by the different states and territories like Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, etc. They adopt these laws and ensure that the workplace is administered with the different health and safety needs. The WHS Act of 2011 is the actual act and the regulations. So how in India also we have Act and Rules, Australia also has a similar structure called Act and Rules. Okay, so Act is published by central governments, and regulations are published by state governments. For example, we have Air Act and we have Air Rules, right? Air Act is published by the central government, Ministry of Environment and Forests, right? Whereas the Air Rules are published, let's say, by KSPCB, Kerala State Pollution Control Board, and are regulated by the Kerala state authorities, right? So similarly, Australia also has acts and regulations which are there, mainly WHS Act 2011 and WHS Regulations 2011, and mainly focusing on hazardous chemical and noise reductions. A lot of psychosocial risks. They focus, WHS laws focus lots on psychosocial risks such as your stress from the workplace. Could be harassment, could be bullying, could be working hours, the amount of stress that could be possible because of overtime exploitation, okay, dust management, safety plans, and worker training. These are a lot of emphasizes of what Australian laws are focusing on. UAE has laws published. The United Arab Emirates has its laws published through MOHRE, which is called as MOHRE, MOHRE, which is the Ministry of Human Resources and Emiratization, right? Under the federal decree law, so you have seen multiple terms. You have CFR in US, you have regulation in UK, you have directive in European Union, you have rules in Australia. Similarly, you have decrees. Okay, so decrees is in the context of acts and rules in the Emirates. There is a federal decree, a central decree, which is published by Emirates, adopted by all the Emiratis, like you have Abu Dhabi, you have Dubai, you have Sharjah. Most of the Emiratis have to adopt the decrees that have been published by MOHRE. And the decree law number 3321 is what is focusing on towards the health and safety regulations, like employment relationship rules are very, very important. Preventive measures. See, everything you see are more or less getting aligned to what we discussed about the international standard called ISO 45000, right? And they focuses on a lot of emphasis on expatriate worker safety, especially if you're from different countries. People should not exploit you, which had happened a lot in the past in UAE. So expatriate worker safety is very, very important emphasis in terms of these health and safety laws. And they do unannounced inspections in free zones where factories are constructed. Free zones, like there are some zones which are controlled, some zones are called free zones. Free zones are where something can be done over there, whereas some control zones, only certain restricted activities are possible. For example, let's say there is a control zone of residence. You can't construct a factory over there, you can't construct a hotel over there. Okay, you can't construct a commercial complex over there. So there is a lot of zoning guidelines over there, and something called free zone is where something you can start a factory, etc. over there, and hence they are termed as free zones. And one of the stringent requirements of the decree in MOHRE is unannounced audit. Anybody, for example, a Jabal Ali Free Zone Authority called a JAFSA. JAFSA can conduct an audit anytime. They can just walk it at 2 p.m. They can walk it at 3 p.m. They can walk at 10 p.m. Provided it's your operational hours, they can walk at morning 6 a.m. They can walk at morning 9 a.m. And they can, once there is a JAFSA notice, it's a huge, huge risk to the employers, including the safety officers. Especially in the Emirates, safety is so prominent that even the MD does not violate if a safety officer has put a rule, because they know the consequences are hectic by the authorities. For example, as I told you, if JAFZA gives a notice, it's a huge pain. So that is why if a safety officer has told stop the work, it is stopped. Even if the MD calls up and tells, hey, it's okay, I am telling you go and do the work. No. If he gets a notice that safety officer has put a notice and has stopped the work, it is a stop. Okay, because a lot of unannounced inspection is there. When it will happen, where it will happen, what date will happen, nobody knows. And if there is a letter of notice, it's really a very huge and cumbersome activity to get out of it. Okay, may cost the industry itself a huge cost. Okay, that's why they're very strict in safety, and these authorities are responsible for enforcing safety zones within the zone. And in India, we have the Factories Act, which is going to get replaced by a universal code. There are multiple labor safety acts like BOCW, Building and Other Construction Workers Act. You have Factories Act, which is for the factories. Okay, you have multiple regulations like that, which everything will get concised into one code called OHS Code 2020, which is yet to be enacted. And then, it applies for anybody having 10 plus workers in a factory with certain machinery. They have to take a factory license, factory provision, and different. They have to ensure the health provisions are there with respect to ventilation, overcrowding, space, ergonomics, and safety with respect to machinery, fencing, and all, and ensure that the working hours is not there. Otherwise, there's huge penalties. Some important regulations focusing on the Emirates region are the safety standards and regulations of Dubai. That is the UAE federal decree, which we have already talked about, as well as some Dubai specific rules are there, such as 2025 heat stress prevention policy. The heat temperatures soar up more than 50 degrees, right? So there is a policy that between 12:30 to 3 o'clock, construction and industrial activities of outdoor work has to be prohibited. It's not that inside the factory they're not supposed to work. Outside the factory, they're not supposed to work. So outdoor works of construction and industrial, especially in summer, are prohibited. And they should give shaded areas, hydration, proper drinking facilities should be there, and acclimatization training should be there, so that people get acclimatized to all the heat related stresses and illness which are caused by Dubai's climate. So there is some local regulation that has to be followed. Similarly, there is health law, which involves the infectious diseases, biological or chemical agents which are involved in the factories. Let's say you are a factory, a pharma factory, there's a lot of biological and chemical agents that you're working with, then you have to comply with this. So these are the additional requirements along with the decree that one has to comply. Similarly, you have some laws additionally in Dubai, such as Emirate of Dubai 2025 Law 5, which talks about hazard controls at the workplace, construction safety laws called Decree number 19, which talks about construction safety, safety plans, code of construction safety practices for heavy machinery, and there's a lot of technical guidelines which are published then on how the chemicals have to be stored, how the hazardous materials have to be stored, noise control, what should be the noise limits, what should be the air quality criteria, etc., and ergonomic assessments that the workplace has to call. So these are some of the additional safety regulations. So along with the decree that I have to follow, called decree number 33. Similarly, there is other things that you have to follow with the location specific. Similarly, in Sharjah, you have the OSHJ, which is the Sharjah Occupational Health and Safety System, which is regulated by SPCA, like how you saw the Emirates Authority of Dubai. Similarly, you saw the Sharjah Authority called SPSA, Sharjah Prevention Safety Authority, like how you have JAFSA over here, which is for Jebel Ali free zone, mainly in Dubai. Similarly, you have in Sharjah called as SPCA, Sharjah Prevention and Safety Authority, which promotes on risk monitoring, federal laws and international. It requires a lot of importance on reporting. It focuses a lot on reporting, saying that in 24 hours after an incident, it should be reported. Non-fatal should be reported within 72 hours, and periodic submission should be there. And then with 12 months, within 12 months, all the requirements once a factory is starting should comply with. and has some basic ILO regulations like PPE, emergency response, and risk analysis, which more or less are the components and elements of ISO 45001, which we discussed. Similarly, Abu Dhabi also has ADPHC, like how you saw SPSA. Similarly, Abu Dhabi has ADPHC, which is Abu Dhabi Public Health Center, which regulates and based on the municipality of Abu Dhabi City, which has ADOSH manual, which talks about some safety requirements that has to be adopted as the Abu Dhabi Health Occupational Health and Safety Framework, ADOSH. Okay, safety framework manual has to be there in every factory. Performance metrics and statistics has to be displayed, like number of accidents, number of incidents, number of toolbox stocks, number of safety trainings given, first aid incidents. All those have to be disclosed to the government and public authorities. Then legal register has to be established and monitored, which should consider all the laws, requirements, and compliance. And definitely talks about training and heat stress, because that is also one of the part of MRAID where heat stress is a common activity. Similarly, some of the Gulf countries like Qatar is another Gulf country, right? So they also have certain rules like every 6 months once, employees have to ensure that health are reported to the authorities. Even if there is zero incidents, they have to file every 6 months once. Summer work regulations 10 to 3 is banned even over there. The sectors are there, and the fines are huge, 50,000 Qatari riyal if something is missed out, right? And then similarly, Saudi Arabia has a law which is regulated by the authority called MHRSD. They are the international authority at Saudi Arabia, which is focusing on Saudi labor laws. And there's the Chapter 8, which is focusing on announced and unannounced audit and digital reporting across the requirements of SASO. Saudi Arabia's safety organization 3358 regulations, right? And it says it mandates mission safety, and it says if a factory is having more than 100, then qualified health and safety officers. And when I say qualified, here qualification means not some private college giving. Government will qualify. They are the officers. So government qualified health and safety officers have to be there. Okay. Similarly, Kuwait has certain regulations which are there published by 2025 Labor Ministry requirements, published by Kuwaiti regulations, where risk assessments have to be there, training has to be there, reporting should be done within 24 to 72 hours. I mean, you will see the focus areas are very common: fumes, machinery, ventilation, safety, emergency, health surveillance. All those are there. Similarly, Bahrain has regulations published under Ministry of Labor and Social Development. The regulations of health and safety in Bahrain is order number 76/2020, which has a lot of regulations, especially work ban between June 15 to September 15, between 12 to 14, because heat stress is very, very common, especially for outdoor activities over there. Okay, that's why this is not a good period, even June to September, even to visit such places, because heat stress is very, very painful. Similarly, Oman has royal decrees over there, just like how UAE has decrees, or Oman also has royal decrees. Similar to Factories Act of India, more than 10 people, if they are there, you need an update and approval from the ministry to run the factory, with submitting all the OHS plans. Okay? So if you see, this gives you a highlight of the different enforcements you have in UAE, the decree law in Saudi Arabia, the again royal decree law in Kuwaiti law 6, Bahrain ministerial order modeled on the UK Act of 1974, then Oman royal decree you are having. Similarly, in Qatar you have the laws, and then these are governed by different agencies like MORE, MHSR, DPAM, HSE, and so on. And you see the fines, my friends, 50,000 AED, which is 5,000 riyals, Saudi Arabia. Yes. Then you have KWD, Kuwaiti dirhams. Then you have BHD, Bahrain, Omar, Qatar riyals. So you have huge amount of fines, which is huge to the industries. That is why adhering to the regulations and understanding the regulations is a key factor, especially in such suits. Okay, and one of the key focuses about, especially when you're talking about Emirates, is very, very popular laws over there is with the Dubai, Sharjah, and Abu Dhabi, where you see a lot of commercialization and are controlled by these additional zones over there, which has like JASA, SPSA, and ADPHC for Abu Dhabi. One of the requirement that you see across all these regulations, whether it's ILO, whether it is USA OSHA, UK HSE, Europe OSHA, or the Australia Safe Work Australia, UAE Mohore, which we have discussed, India, everything definitely focuses and have a lot of linkage to the ILO conventions. So that is like the root, as I told you, right? Everything has originated from there, and everything focuses on risk prevention techniques, etc. Uh, these are some of the key manufacturing focuses that are there across the different decrees. I think by now you are familiar with the different decrees of different regions. So, and if you see the manufacturing focus area, for example, UAE focuses on toxic chemicals, heavy machinery, heat stress mitigation, risk evaluation, PPE provisions, medical screening, health checkup for the employees. Similarly, Dubai, you have the same. Sharjah, if you see, more or less are the same. Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, you see most of the elements that are either listed in this box are almost the same. And why do you think there is this commonalization of all these, whether it is within the Gulf countries or within the Emirates, or even if you see across the world, India, US, UK, Europe, you will see more or less are the same: machine guarding, PPE usage, hazard communication, emergency preparedness, risk management, chemical exposure, annual health checkups, welfare facilities, etc. Why do you see so common across different regulations of their countries? Could be OSHA regulation, could be hair directives, could be WHS, could be OHS code of India. Why do you see all these are common, whether it's at the Gulf or the Emirates or whether it's across the world? Is because everything is linked to the ILO conventions. Everything has its root to the ILO conventions. These are the key conventions. And if you familiarize yourself with these key conventions, let's say you're going to Norway, let's say you imagine you go even to Antarctica, and if Antarctica is a member of ILO, even in Antarctica, if they define safety guidelines, it will be based on ILO convention. So as individuals who are interested in this health and safety as a career, health and safety as, okay, what is health and safety to me if I'm going somewhere? Understanding the conventions is very, very important, like C115, C119, C127, maximum weight for lifting, carrying, transportation, vehicle or manual, okay, benzene convention for the exposure, PL, permittable exposure limits of certain hazardous and volatile organic compounds called as VOC compounds. Then similarly, 139 for carcinogenic elements exposure because of heavy metals and stuff like that. Working environment, 148, 155, 161, 170. Out of these key conventions, two conventions are very, very important, which is your C155 and 161. This more or less is the convention which are largely used by all the national and international standards across the world to frame their regulatory requirements. If you see all these manner focus areas that we spoke about, all these focus areas are having its roots to either C155 and C161 of this international convention. And if any individual quite familiarizes themselves with these conventions, then it becomes a great advantage of understanding and interpreting the entire regulations of national or international requirements that are needed at the workplace. So one of the key ILO considerations, which is common in all the regulations, is the employees have to ensure that the workplaces are free from biological or physical or chemical risks through preventive and proactive measures. Conduct the risk assessments in consultation with the workers. You cannot just do a risk assessment in a laptop sitting in front of you or in a computer sitting on your desk. You have to go to the shop floor, you have to go to the site, you have to go to the premises where the work is being performed, and you have to discuss with the workers who are doing the work and do the risk assessment and establish the controls in terms of engineering, administrative, etc., and provide free with training. The controls, you should not charge the workers. PPE, you should not charge the workers. Training, you should not charge the workers. That is one of the important regulations for ILO. Training for safety. If you personally want to seek a qualification, that is not the requirement. But if I'm operating a machine, I require training on a machine. I can't charge you for that training, right? When it is given in the factory. Then implement surveillance cameras of implement surveillance of environments and annual health examinations, indoor air quality examination, workplace examination, etc., to ensure that safety hazards are detected and eliminated. Safety without shifting responsibilities. You have to have one accountable person in the factory for safety, and that accountable person is also accountable in the court of law. Okay, develop all the emergency preparedness. So this is something that all the laws, whatever we have discussed, have everything in common. Okay, and for the authorities also across the world, it is common that they have to randomly walk into the factories and carry out the audits. Frameworks for prevention and surveillance, they have to share, like yearly once you should do it, or monthly once you should do it, or quarterly once you should do it, based on the geographical needs of that location. And if there is outbreaks and issues, how do you handle it, and emergency situations. And every workers have some rights that, they should be consulted on hazard identification, they should get training, they have the right for medical examination at the workplace because of the health exposure that they are having. And without safety, or without reprisal, fear of reprisal, they can feel free to report any safety incident without getting fear that there'll be repercussions from it. So, and the workers, one of the important worker duties, if the employer is doing so much, you can't say that, okay, I've given you a helmet, sorry, I don't want to wear a helmet, right? So a worker should ensure that they comply with all the safety measures. So if you don't comply with the safety measures, even if there is an incident, no court of law can help you, because it is behavior failure of the workers. So these are some of the key ILO considerations which are common in all the regulations. So thank you so much for this time. I hope I have given you a brief overview. The subject is quite vast, and the time was quite restricted. And definitely, I think, in the given interest of time, I've stuck to the schedule, and I hope I have given you a brief overview about what are the key regulations. So I feel I leave the forum open. I again thank the entire management, the coordinators, the staff, and the committee for giving this valuable opportunity to have this interaction with you. So over to you guys. If you have any queries and questions, feel free. Please let me know. Please ask any queries and questions. If not, I'll hand over it back to the coordinator who can do the closing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Dear participants, is there any query? If you have, you can ask.
I don't know if somebody has left anything in the chat box. So
Yes, some question is there.
okay, so let me try to see in the chat box. So okay, one question is, fines vary significantly. Do higher fines actually improve compliance, or do awareness and training play a bigger role? Oh, that's actually a very good question, Mr. Srinivasa. But I would say is, I as I told you earlier, there is something called fear, right? So fines definitely bring fear, and fear instills some form of discipline across the workers, as well as the employees, as well as the employers. Okay, so one, it helps you to align the practice, but at the same time, safety is a culture, and a culture is strengthened only through awareness and training. Just because a fine is there, and if you don't concentrate on awareness and training, you definitely will have safety incidents. So I would say it's like the hand of justice, right? You have a weighing scale, and if that weighing scale has to be equal on both sides, okay, you should have both balance. So yes, on one side you have fines which are a balance, and on the other side you have awareness and training as a balance. And with proper impositions of fines as a regulator, we ensure safety incidents are not happening. And as an employer, proper investment in awareness and training plays a bigger role to bring in the cultural awareness to prevent incidents. So I wouldn't say which is higher, both have an equal scale, but it all depends upon the attitude and the approach of the organization and their members. If they feel regulation becomes is more important to them, that is important. See, because a small quote is that a father asks a son, aeroplane, how big it is from very far. He says it's a very small thing. And if the son is taken next to the aeroplane, the child is taken next to the aeroplane, he says the same aeroplane is very big, right? So similarly, what is more big depends upon what interests you. If you see fine is the biggest thing, then fine drives health and safety better. If you see training is the biggest thing, then training drives health and safety is the better. So it all depends upon what interests you in driving this. So I hope that gives you a brief answer to your question, Mr. Srinivasa. But it was an interesting question. Thank you. Okay, so Vijay Anand asks a question. Rula and Reba study how these two enhance safety in manufacturing industry in the current situation, as most of the industries are now changing into with respect to automation, right? Yeah. See, Rula and Reba study. They are still significant. See, we call these days something called as Industry 5.0. What is Industry 5.0? Industry 5.0 is not talking about a replacement of humans with automation. It talks about hybrid utilizing automation to making the lives of humans easier, right? So Rula and Reba is basically associated with it's another form of a subset of risk studies such as rapid upper limb assessment or rapid entire body assessment, right? So it's basically an assessment to see how your MSDs can be prevented, not Mahindra Singh Dhoni, it is musculoskeletal disorders, right? So how MSDs can be prevented. So they do play an important role because how much of our automation is there. Finally, when you're talking about machinery or anything, we have probably not come to an era where there is a complete robot. Even if it's a robot going and repairing, finally, if something is there to a robot, you have humans. So you wouldn't say it is irreplaceable, right? So humans are definitely there as a point of interaction. Maybe the count is lesser, but as far as there is an exposure of a human, and there is a MST for the human musculoskeletal disorder that could be happening because of the type of activity they are doing. So Rula and Reba still plays a role in carrying out the assessment to rule out that MSD injuries can be prevented to the employees. So yes, it still has a significance. Maybe the quantum of how many lives are getting impacted might have changed, but the study or the aspect of not doing it has not been going to be changed. Okay, so definitely that is there. Okay, and then you have Mr. Srinivasa Rao with another question. So which says, with petrochemicals being a regional priority, how can GCC countries develop joint regulational HSE standards for high risk industries? I think they are still doing all those. So GCC countries do get by and they have local regulations. I did not touch about industry based regulations. So if you say petroleum regulations, there is separate substandards written on, like how in India we have Factories Act, but we still have PESO, Petroleum and Explosives Safety Organization, which has given some guidelines on certain attributes of explosives and petroleum. Similarly, there is definitely GCC countries also have their internal petrochemical industry standards, which are universally based on a lot of overseas petrochemical standards also, and they have already have that in place, but I did not touch industry specific standard because industry specific standard in the given time I cannot cover all the industries. But yes, there is already a regulations and there are joint committees, especially at the GCC countries, because petrol is one of the biggest industry to them, and they have a lot of safety regulations which are industry specific safety regulations which are related to petrochemicals. Mr. Srinivasa, thank you so much for that. Any other questions?
Dear participants, is there any other questions?
Okay, just if I have time, so Mr. Srinivasa, you can go through GSO 2654. GSO 2654 is the Gulf Standard Organization like ISO. GSO is the Committee for the Gulf Standard Organization in Gulf. 2654 is something that they have, especially under petrochemicals and common, which is across to UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, etc. related to petrochemical safety aspects, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Srinivasa, please. Thank you, Mr. Rajesh. How can safety training be designed to overcome literacy and language barrier? That comes back to one of the important thrust what OHS code of US stresses on. OHS code of US stresses on what is called as visual workplace. A piece of art can have 1,000 words, right? You have a picture in front of you, you can talk about 1,000 words. If I have to describe, a green tree with a, lush green river, I can write some 500 words, but I can just make art to describe it, right? So that's why signage focuses on a lot of stress in the US OSHA guidelines, which focuses on safety training so that the language barrier is not there. So if you see a no parking symbol that is understood through the signage, it is no parking. I don't require a language for that, right? So a caution symbol, a warning symbol, a danger symbol. So if safety trainings have to be designed, that's why even if you see especially chemicals, they just don't write it in words. You see a lot of symbols and signages. So symbols and signages are an important mechanism that can be imparted as training culture, that this symbol means this signage means this symbol is this signage is this. And if you impart your trainings through symbols and signages, then it can definitely overcome literacy as well as language barrier amongst different workforce. I hope that addresses your query. Thank you. Yeah, yeah, the digital platforms can definitely be adopted. There is a lot of LMS tools. Many organizations have walked away from physical training, classroom training, or virtual training to LMS-based training, where the learning management suite is there, and at their own time and convenience, they see the videos, they see the lectures, and they get aware about it. Just like how you have Netflix. Multiple videos, multiple movies, multiple languages, multiple subtitles. Yes, digital platforms like LMS systems do adopt a lot of these, but there's again a cost and balance. Signages are cheaper. Digital platforms are definitely a little bit more expensive. So each organization outweighs its cost versus effort and then takes a decision. But definitely that is also a good platform to think over in terms of helping organization have a continuous training aspect. Any other query?
There is no more questions, sir.
Thank you so much, then. So I hope I can stop sharing my screen now. So thank you so
Yes,
much.
sir. Thank you, sir, for the session. The session was very informative. Once again, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for the valuable opportunity, ma'am, and wish you all the very best, guys.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Dear participants, attendance link and feedback link are shared in the chat box. Tomorrow, we will start the session by 2 p.m. Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.